And we're back to our conversation about OPX AI. And I'm here with Joon. My name is Yogashri Pradhan, and I'm the CGO of OPX AI. Just as for those of you that are tuning in for the first time. And with me here today, I have Joon, who is our CEO, our founder, everything that is related to OPX AI. That is Jay. Jay is the man. So I had a list of questions for Jay, and a lot of it has to do with all the exciting things that are happening with OPX AI, that the developments over the past few months, really since the genesis of OPX AI. But we're building the momentum, and it's coming up to this magical moment. So, Jay, can you explain a little bit about what OPX AI has been up to recently?
So lately, we've been taking the operating knowledge we have built through years of field and integrated operations work, turning it into something that could be repeated. We call it memory lanes. Simply put, we give industrial operations a memory of what happened, why it happened, what people decided, what they did, and whether it actually worked. Because right now, most companies have all the pieces. The pressure is in the historian, the alarm is in the alarm system, the job is in the CMMS, the procedure is buried somewhere in a SharePoint document, um, the decision is actually somebody's email. And the real reason anything happened is often still living in the head of a guy named Mike who's hunting that week and not answering his phone. And that is not operational continuity, right? That is an expensive scavenger hunt. So what we are building is memory lanes to connect that operating story around a well, facility, piece of equipment, or even a workflow. We have an interface called Buddy. It sits on top as the interface and action layer, but we are not selling a chatbot with a hard hat. Buddy is the interface. The moat is memory. And the memory lane is positioned as the durable operational memory asset, while Buddy is the interface, intelligence, and action layer operating on top of it.
That's really awesome. I think my favorite quote out of all of that, what you said, is we are not selling a chatbot with a hard hat. And I started immediately thinking about a chatbot with a hard hat on it, or thinking with Claude with a hard hat on it, things like that. But you touched upon this a little bit, Jay, that we're trying to solve a problem, and it's not even a technical problem. It's more of how how the operational state being is, the nature of the beast that is the experience that we're trying to hand over from one person to another. So can you clarify a little bit about what is that problem that we're trying to solve?
Yeah, and nothing is new. AI has been there for a few years. Digital transformation has been happening for decades, right? So companies have tools and people, very smart people, to solve problems. But even through that time, the one thing we have consistently heard is that operators are drowning in work, drowning in data, or drowning in information, but they're still starving for context. Every operator I have known knows this feeling. You get an alarm, you pull up the trend, you check three screens, right? You read a shift note that says monitor closely. And that is one of my favorite oilfield phrases. Monitor closely usually means somebody knew something was wrong, did not know what to do with it, and politely handed the grenade to the next shift, right? Then you start making phone calls. Hey, has this happened before? Was the wall already acting up? Did maintenance touch it yesterday? Did the engineering change the operating limit? The the guys before us, did they shift the choke, the well back for a reason? Um, was the last action a permanent fix, or Did we just beat it back into submission long enough to finish the shift? The information exists somewhere, but the operator has to rebuild the whole story. So every operating upset becomes a fresh crime scene investigation, and that creates four painful problems. First one is repeated troubleshooting. The company keeps paying to solve the same problem over and over again, right? Another problem that you must know is bad handovers. One shift knows the whole story. The next shift, they get the three sentences and thumbs up emoji. Third, inconsistent execution, right? Day shift does one thing, night shift does another. The vendor, he or she has a third opinion. Uh, Engineering shows up Tuesday and wonders why everybody ignored the procedure that was written in 2017. Right? Fourth, the knowledge walks out of the gate. When an SME, a person who has been there for 35 years, 40 years, they retire, or even if someone changes job or simply is fishing that day, part of that asset's memory leaves with them. If your operating system is find the gray-haired guy, you do not have a system. You have a dependency. So the approved OPX AI framing, it identifies the repeated troubleshooting, the slow response, the inconsistent execution, or the knowledge loss as the daily cost of missing operational memory.
I love another quotable quote from you that was it, it, it was more about you don't somebody having gray hair, that is not a workflow, that is a dependency, and that should put chills in people's minds. um, that should really remind people that we need something repeatable, something that is sustainable, something that can stand on its own as operational handover and operational memory. You know, you mentioned this quite a bit, the word memory a lot, and you also mentioned this in the first question about memory lane. You know, for those who haven't been in the weeds like you have in developing the latest and greatest with OPX AI, and i.e. our audience, what exactly is this memory lane?
Okay. Um, I think I need to use an example. I'll give you a very simple example. And it's about the workflow as well, right? How it happens. So let's say you have a producing well, it starts losing rate, and the pressure is all wonky going up and down. The system, which is SCADA, will tell us something changed. Okay. But that signal is only the first breadcrumb that you're going to get. The memory lane, it begins by connecting the whole operating change. That's the idea. First, what did the system show? What changed? And when did it change? Which alarm it came first? And which was it? Like, not every alarm is the part of the problem, but sometimes there are alarms that come after the fact. So we want to find which alarms were the actual problem and which ones were just the equipment screaming because something upstream has already gone wrong. That's one from the system point. But second is, what did the operator see? Was there vibration? Was the line freezing? Did the separator sound wrong? Or was the chemical pump stroking at the time? Or did the well start heading south after a specific operating change? The field observation may never appear in the historian, but it can be the most important piece of the puzzle. And now, truly, it becomes integrated operations when engineering tells us what they think. What were the competing explanations? What evidence supported them forth? And the last final piece, was when these guys got together, what did they decide? Did we shut it in? Did we choke it back? Did we pump more chemical into it or less? Did we call maintenance? Um, or most of the times, did we keep it running and watch it? And most importantly, why? What action was actually taken becomes the fifth part. Because what was approved in the meeting and what happened in the field are not always identical twins, right? And once you even decide that and take that action, did it matter? Did the well stabilize? For how long? Did we make up for the lost production or did we make more? Did the did the problem return again a few hours later? Um, that real question is, did we actually fix the issue or did we just buy ourselves enough time to hand it to the next row, right? When you go through all these, one thing that keeps happening is the next someone there knows what lesson should be learned from all this. So the workflow becomes signal, observation, decision, action, outcome, and the lesson. The problem we are finally solving is that every shift should not have to start from a blank page. We stop every repeat event from becoming another episode of Oilfield CSI, right? They should know what happens on this well, why it happens, when was the last time that thing happened, what did we learn from it. The what did we learn from it becomes the best practice for that asset, right? And when you compound all this information, like it happened once, you remember it. If it happens 100 times over a year, the compounding effect has such a effect that you know now about that asset. Like every time this thing happens to this asset, this is what we are supposed to do. The lesson learned. Nobody is capturing that right now,
That's very
right?
interesting.
Yeah. So
Well, no, go ahead.
so if you want the official definition or formal definition, the memory lane is a governed operating record around a specific asset or workflow. But when you go and talk to the guys, it should be simpler. It's the complete story attached to the asset that caused everybody trouble. That's it.
What I really liked about what you said, and another quotable quote from you, is the not every problem or not every asset should turn into oilfield CSI. And it that resonates with me quite a bit working in the field where whenever something there is a problem, there's a lot of seriousness tied to it and there's a lot of scrambling, for lack of a better word, of trying to figure out what's going on. And there's a lot of reactiveness to it. How can we be more proactive in that regard? And I think the memory lane is pointing towards that. You know, you mentioned something very interesting in the sense that the governing body of 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 the particular asset and everything in the history that's tied to that asset or tied to that well. You know, if memory lanes are meant to record things that have happened or showcase the present state and the past state of a particular asset, can you give some clarity as to how it can help us make better decisions?
Hmm. That's interesting. Nobody has asked me that, but that is an important distinction, right? Memory lane, it does not say, hey, we did this last time, so blindly do it again. That would be dangerous. And frankly, Oilfield already has enough copy and paste engineering. The past is just that, the past. It's an evidence of what happened. It's not a recipe card. So when a new event happens, we look at the current conditions and compare them with relevant prior events. That's how humans work, right? What looks similar, what is different, what was tried before, under what conditions did it work, when did it fail, what has changed since then. A lot of times the pressure pattern may look identical, but today the either snowing or it's too hot, right? Um, Maybe maintenance came and replaced something last week. Maybe now the well is operating at a different rate. The whole equipment has changed. Um, Maybe the last thing that worked for 30 minutes, which means it was not actually a solution, it was a timeout, right? So the memory lane, it gives the operator and engineer a better starting point. It can say, here's what happened before, here's what worked under similar conditions, here's what did not work, here is what is different today, here are the risks and considerations. And after that, the human element comes in and the right person makes or approves the decision, right? But memory is just memory. It tells you what happened here, right? We're not putting a black box in the field and letting it tell a pumper to start turning valves like it owns the lease, right? This is human in the loop, source referenced decision support. The goal is not to replace operators or replace field judgment. That is very important piece. The goal is to stop wasting field judgment again and again and again. That's what this is about.
Really like what you said. And again, a lot of this resonates with me. I love the fact that there's human in the loop decision making. There's been quite a bit of scare of AI in the field, and many people thinking that AI is going to take my job, or fear of other people's use cases of AI may not be perfect, in the sense that people may not have the creativity, the human element associated with that. So, what makes this memory lanes and the workflow of memory lanes really important is that there's human in the loop decision making, and it's enhancing human decision making as opposed to replacing human decision making. And I want to definitely make that distinction based on what you've mentioned. So thank you so much for that clarification, especially with the enhancement for decision making. I've been thinking about another question here, and a lot of it has to do with the concept of memory lanes being a governing body for an asset. Now, it's hard to visualize because I've seen the interface, but for the viewers and listeners that may not have seen the interface before, when I think of a governing body of an asset, I start immediately, there could be a perception of silos. So, how can multiple memory lanes be combined together to enhance a decision or to provide more context?
So I'll take a step back and tell you something else. Like, think about problems in anything in life, right? Uh, One operating problem rarely stays politely inside one piece of equipment. A well problem may involve the wellbore, mm, can be a lift equipment, can be a flow line, separator, chemical program, alarms, maintenance, history, and operating procedure. So you might have one memory lane for the well, another for the lift, another for alarms, another for separator, another for maintenance. When the well starts acting up, those memory lanes can contribute to the context relevant to that decision. The well memory lane, and it could be for different wells within one pad. And then we have this asset hierarchy where context is compounding between assets. What that means is I want to solve problems for a basin, then for an asset, then for a pad, and then for wells. So it tells you how this well behaves, then it tells you how all the wells on this pad behave, so how this pad behaves. So that's the pad memory. Then how the number of pads within an asset behave, or what happens inside a basin. That could be totally different from a different basin, right? The well memory lane may show that the production has fallen 3 times under similar conditions. Then the alarms may show that one alarm usually appears first, while the other 20 alarms are just the coil joining in. right? Mm. Then the maintenance may show that the valve or choke has been recently serviced. The left memory lane may show you that the same operating adjustment worked on a similar well, but failed when the fluid level was lower, and could be a different well within the basin or could be elsewhere. The operating procedure memory lane may show that what is approved, where the operator discretion applies. Together, like, yes, there are standards and practices that come from top down where people are telling you this is what we have decided is going to how we operate. But when you go to the well, the things are different. Like no two wells run the same, right? So our goal was how do we still take the top-down standards and best practices or operating procedures, but then when you go to the execution level of it, how does that operating knowledge flow back? Like what is happening on these assets? Actually, yes, we tried that operating procedure, didn't work. We tried something else, it worked. Over a period of time, it improves and compounds the memory. And they create all this, the operating procedures and the execution memory, it creates a fuller operating picture. So we do not just dump everything into one giant digital junk drawer. The context has to be relevant to the asset. It has to be permissioned, it has to be time aware, state aware, and it has to show where it came from. Over a time, every lesson from every well can help another well. Or even now we are realizing this can help you design the next asset better. But we still have to ask whether the completions, the equipment, the fuel conditions, geography, operating state are actually comparable. Because anybody who has been in the patch knows this. Two wells can sit 50 feet apart and still behave like they were raised by different families.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And again, this sounds extremely powerful, very relevant, especially thinking about some of my experiences in the field and as a production engineer, wishing to have that context of the bigger picture context. That way we don't repeat or rhyme history, you know. So this is very powerful stuff. You know, I want to leave you away with one more question. Like before I let you go, there's one more question I wanted to ask you. And it's along the lines of talking about memory lanes, but talking about the workflow in general and talking about the Buddy AI interface. So, what is that one takeaway you want others to learn about the workflow and everything that OPX AI has been up to?
Um, it's similar to what you just said. The one takeaway is this. Um, the same asset should not have to teach the company the same lesson twice. Every time a well fails, an alarm flood, the control room handover misses something, or a crew troubleshoots a repeat issue, the company is continuously paying tuition. How's that? I'm saying tuition because it pays in downtime, it pays in lost production, it pays in overtime, it pays in phone call. Nobody says it, but it pays in frustration. And when you go talk to people, sometimes it pays in safety exposure. The problem is that we keep paying the tuition, but we do not always keep the lesson. Memory lanes are about retaining that lesson around the asset where it belongs. They do not replace the operator. They give the next operator the benefit of what the last operator learned. They do not replace engineering. They preserve the engineering rationale so the next decision does not begin with guesswork. They do not replace SCADA or Pi. They connect the signal to the operating story behind it. Yes, SCADA and Pi tells you this happened. Why, how, when, the whole operating story behind it. That has to be connected to those signals. And that is the opportunity, right? Take all that hard-won operating experience and stop letting it disappear into mails, shift books, spreadsheets, and somebody's memory. Turn it into governed operational memory. And do not try to boil the whole ocean. Start with one memory lane and one expensive operational problem, right? I would leave you and everyone else who's watching with one question. You've seen operations. So where in your operations do people reportedly every time have to reconstruct what happened before they can decide what to do next? That is probably the time you're losing every day. And that is exactly where you're paying for the same lesson more than once. So if you start doing that with memory lanes, then you'll have more time to yourself. And you could start there.
I think what makes this very palatable, not just palatable, but very doable, for lack of a better word, is you don't have to boil the entire ocean. You can start with one memory lane, one asset at a time, and it grows from there. That makes it less intimidating, honestly, as far as it changed, because this is not just only disruptive. This is a I do think that after speaking with you on this, it's been a game changer, and I know after going offline about it, or when we've talked about it offline, it's definitely a game changer, and I've had to wrap my head around it a couple times, but I realized that yeah, this is very novel. So, well, Jay, thank you so much for your time and always sharing your expertise and always sharing the latest and greatest of what's going on. It sounds like OPXAI is up to some very exciting things, having all the conversations in the production operations space and really how we should be operating better. So, reach out to us on our LinkedIn, our Instagram, and yes, and in our YouTube. This will be posted on YouTube, and several of our reels will be posted on various platforms as well. Jay, did you have anything else to say?
No, I would leave you guys with this. Like, there's an AI race that is going on. Somebody had to deliver the rocket fuel to those guys because they want to go to the space. So we believe memory lanes is just that. When companies, when they want to do things internally, that's how you integrate operations. That's how you learn from the group working together. So
Excellent. And I will leave everyone with that. I hope everyone has a great rest of their day, and we are signing off.